As we get into the design and decorating and refining stage of our mugs, I want to talk to you guys again about carving. Carving is an area in your final submissions that I still see the same thing, which are these skinny, scratched in lines that look like they were done with either a sharp pencil or the toothpick that I provided you with. I just want to say again that carving should be something that is done with a blunt item. Ideally, if we were in the classroom, I would have provided you with these tools here. They are called loop or ribbon tools, and the idea is they actually pull out a chunk of clay. So you're removing the clay to get your carved lines rather than scratching them in with something sharp. Since I'm sure many of us do not have ribbon tools at home, a common household item that would work very well is a paper clip. So what I do is I actually just unbend it and then rebend it in the center of a straight section to give it a more narrow or a finer point. Another common error that I'm seeing is that carving should be done in the leather hard stage, not the plastic stage. Saving your carving for the leather hard stage will give you the cleanest lines. In addition, if I carve too early and then continue to handle my mug to add designs, chances are that my handling it will end up causing me to lose those carved lines. Usually what happens is the wet clay gets pushed in and fills in the lines and you can't see them and you need to neaten them up anyway. So you may as well save yourself a step and just let it dry a little bit before carving. Hopefully you can see as I continue to carve my example, my lines are crisp, they're even, they're clean. They are less likely to get those rough burrs around the edge. And if I haven't convinced you yet to wait until leather hard, you will also save yourself some frustration because when you carve out clay from leather hard, the clay will simply fall off rather than stick to your tool or your pot, which can get very annoying after a while. And that happens because the clay is wet and it is more sticky. And if you don't happen to have a paper clip at home, continue to search around until you find something relatively like the back of my paintbrush here, or anything else that has a rounded end so that as you carve, you can still push the clay out of the way instead of carving it out. So the remainder of this video I'm going to attempt to have be very Bob Ross-esque, in which I simply continue to decorate my mug, and when I feel the need to share a tip or a trick with you or explain what I've been doing, I will do so in a relatively relaxed manner so that you guys can simply play this in the background while you work, and hopefully something might stick out to you and you might find it helpful. One thing that I like to do after I've added some sculptural elements is go in with either my finger or some sort of tool and just clean up where I connected it, get rid of any leftover score marks, and just kind of really seal that connection. I find a wet brush is helpful. It smooths it out very nicely, but if you don't have a wet brush, then hopefully your finger will do. And throughout this whole thing, I just perform general maintenance, clean up any nicks I may have accidentally made, or smooth over any imperfections that I may have not noticed before. When it comes to making mug handles, there are many ways to go about doing it, but what you can see me doing here is rolling out a piece of clay into a thick coil. I'm not going super thin with it, but I'm rolling it out enough to get a nice long shape from it. And then I actually go back in with my PVC pipe just to flatten it a little bit. I'm not making it very thin, but I do prefer with my handles that they have a flatter and less round shape. If you want, you can leave yours as a full round coil. You do not have to flatten it the way I'm doing. You can even just start by rolling out a slab and then cutting it into a strip. Either way, what I like to do with my handles is take my sponge with water and then run it along the handle just to give it a nice smooth appearance, especially if you were to cut it out of a strip. They have these sharp, rough, angular edges, and I prefer handles to be a little softer since we want them to be comfortable in our hands. Handles should also be relatively sturdy, so they shouldn't be these dainty little coils or dainty little slabs, but you also don't want them to be too chunky either. As always, it's a fine balance between being too thick and too thin. The shape of your handle is 100% up to you. You can make them a very standard size, you can make them angled. What I'm doing here is I'm just holding my handle up to my mug so I can get a general idea of what it would look like attached. And of course, if you're doing a sculptural statement handle, you do not need to worry about this. You will simply sculpt your handle and attach it as needed. Normally it might be a good idea to make your handle and then let it sit out in the appropriate shape so it can get a little firm. And the reason for this is because if we attach it too soft, you'll notice it's going to want to droop down. If you're paying attention to what I'm doing in the video, I just dabbed a little bit of slip onto the ends of my handle and I held it up the way that I want it to be so that that slip leaves a mark on my mug so that I know where I need to slip in order for it to be attached in the right spot. Here what I'm also doing is I'm cutting it to be a little bit more uniform with the shape of the mug. You might find that trying to attach a curved surface to another curved surface is easier than trying to make a flat surface fit with a curved surface. As always, score before attaching anything. Also make sure that the two items you're attaching are of relatively equal moisture levels. And this is particularly the case with handles. It should be the case with most things you attach, but as I attach this, I'm going to be making sure that I press nice and hard against the mug, making sure to brace the interior with my other hand so that it does not cave. Giving a good amount of pressure will ensure that this handle does not want to detach itself from the mug. Really quickly while I'm setting up my camera, you can see that I've decided to float to the bottom of my mug handle, and just to ensure that it doesn't fall off, I'm supporting the bottom with a piece of bone dry clay, which I can remove once this is dry. One thing I don't think I've covered much is the need to add some extra clay at times to really support and ensure strength of certain attached pieces. So this is what I'm doing here. Wherever you attach your handle, especially if it's sculptural, you should be rolling out small coils and placing them where the handle meets the mug and smoothing them out to the point where you can't tell that you added any more clay. This will make your handle and your mug look like they came from the same piece of clay, and it will just add that much more strength to this connection. Right now, I've done it just on the top of the handle, but I will be adding another coil to the bottom part of the connection as well. Here I just double check to make sure that my handle is straight up and down. I can do this because the bottom is not attached, but this is something you'd want to consider double checking before you connect the bottom part of your handle. At this point, now I am considering adding my designs to my handle. Like I said, your handle does not need to be the shape of something, but you can add designs to it. So here I'm just adding little fishies to the handle to represent my cat's favorite dish, which is sloppy, nasty salmon fillet. And apparently I've decided that in addition to the little fish, I'm going to make the handle itself look like a little miniature cat. So at this point, I'm adding teeny tiny cat ears, and just watch if you can how I use my tools to connect and smooth even the smallest of attachments such as these. I know we don't have these specific tools at home, but if you really want to, I'm sure we could find something to act similarly. So what I'm about to do is attach a very teeny tiny nose. But before I do that, I'm actually going to create a small hole or crater on my mug where I plan on attaching it so that I can stick a little bit of that attachment into the hole, so I'm not just relying on surface attachment. So that means I'm forming my attachment in such a way that it has a little peg, you could say, to stick into that hole. This last thing that I'm going to do, which you do not need to do, but you're welcome to try, is I'm going to take another piece of clay and create a stamp. So what I'm doing is I'm carving just a small little heart shape onto a piece of clay so that the heart is protruding out. So I can either push down the extra bits of clay around it or I can scrape them away. Doesn't matter how you do it. All you want to do is be left with just the heart or whatever the shape on your stamp is sticking up. If you think you might want to do this with a letter, just remember the letter will be backwards if you make it look right ways on the stamp. After I've finished with this, I need to leave it out so that it dries. If I try to stamp with it now, it will just get smushed in. So I need it to be bone dry so that it holds its shape while I press it into my leather hard mug. And so this is the next day. I'm just refining that stamp. I did it a few times and I realized I was getting more impressions than I wanted, so I'm cleaning up the edges. And simply enough, I just press in, I rotate it around a little bit so that I know it's getting into my clay evenly, and it leaves a nice uniform heart wherever I feel like pressing it. And I'm starting to feel like I've made the best use of the surface area of my mug without crowding it. So now I'm just going in and refining, making some of my carving a little bit deeper and more defined. And lastly, these are those burrs that I was making a big deal about before. If you notice these in your carvings, it's as simple as once your clay is bone dry, you can just go in with your fingernail and scrape off that little excess bit of clay so that your carving is more flush and even. If these get fired with those little bits of clay sticking out, they will actually be pretty sharp and uncomfortable to handle. So, can't wait to see how these turn out.